So just a bit of background regarding Corné. He's been presenting since yesterday, so his face should be familiar by now. And then Dr. Jana van Rensburg will be joining him. Corné has been working in system dynamics for the last 8 years, mostly in water and energy. Um, he's employed by the largest energy utility in Africa, Eskom. Okay. To date, he has 17 papers accepted and presented at local and international conferences on system dynamics. He initiated the system dynamics modeling competition, and this year was the fifth edition. He's passionate about spreading system dynamics and teaching it, and this led him to pursue a master's in teaching in the field. Um, and yeah, he completed his MSc cum laude. Well done. Then Dr. Jana van Rensburg is currently working as a quality manager at Ariston, South Africa. She's a global leader in thermal comfort and energy efficiency, and she obtained her PhD in chemical engineering in 2019 with a focus on dewatering technologies in the fine coal beneficiation sector. Her studies resulted in 8 published papers in peer-reviewed journals and conferences. Her work resulted in being nominated as a semi-finalist in waste beneficiation. And yeah, she's been hosted by UNIDO, Clean Tech Open, and the Technology Innovation Agency. And she's passionate about research and specifically business and industrial development. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Jana, can you please start sharing your screen so we can begin?
Okay, just give me a moment.
Everyone is waiting. We're already behind. You're wasting our time, please, sir.
Okay. I'm trying my best. I just can't remember where this thing is again. Sorry.
How many times have I showed you and you still can't get it right? Wow. How can you be so slow?
Why are you so mean? We are literally being recorded. Can't you see that?
Yeah, because you're so incompetent, that's why.
I think you're being unreasonable. Please come down and I'll show Jana where to click.
Thank you.
Plooy,
thank you.
No, but you don't understand how difficult it is to work with this Jana. She has hurt my reputation multiple times.
You are the problem. You don't communicate your expectations and then you want to blame me. I'm sorry.
Well, you deserve it, Corné. I know how unreasonable you can be at times.
Yeah, I agree. So, how many of you felt like you were being drawn into this conflict? Well, let's take a closer look into a typical case study of workplace conflict. Meet our team. We have Omar, Nadeem, Lani, all junior sales consultants. Then we have Ntabi as our senior sales consultant and Samantha as the sales manager and also the team lead. In this case, Omar has recently been feeling that his line manager Samantha has been a persecutor and that she's constantly picking on him during their weekly feedback meetings. Even though he didn't fully meet his targets, he still felt that his failure to meet his targets was actually criticized much more compared to that of his co-workers. He will often complain about the type of projects that Samantha has assigned to him and actually secretly blames her for these unrealistic targets placed on him. She, on the other hand, has become quite opinionated about Omar, and she is not valuing his opinions anymore. She is angry and more demanding. Sometimes it's justified and other times it's not. Omar, feeling like a real victim, has decided to confide in his co-worker Nadeem. After listening to Omar recalling his experience, Nadeem decided to be an actual hero and tried to confront Samantha about the situation. Samantha was quite surprised about this. Moreover, she was quite surprised that Omar felt like this. He hasn't actually spoken to her about it. And she felt that Nadeem and Omar was actually ganging up against her. So initially, where she really pushed Omar, she then started to draw back in the meetings. She started expecting less from her team and more deadlines were missed. And in the end, she spent time questioning her own ability to lead her team. Samantha sought out help from her other senior sales agent, and making Hintabi her hero, where she complained about the situation to Hintabi. Nadeem, again spending so much time with Omar and Samantha, has felt that Lani is someone that he can really confide in about the situation because the others are not listening to him. Again, Hintabi started feeling that Lani is constantly losing focus on her work, and she started being frustrated by her choosing the side of the guys. So she started victimizing Lani based on her own convictions. In the end, this conflict has resulted in Hintabi feeling like a victim. She felt that she's actually the only one keeping this company afloat, and she is the one doing all of the work. This is a typical drama triangle. It's described by Cartman, and they specifically mention that a victim is often the start of or the catalyst that motivates the formation of the drama triangle. In principle, the victim is often trapped by some kind of a persecution and wants to be saved by a hero. A victim will stay in this position of vulnerability and oppression and often deems themselves as powerless and that they cannot take control of their own situation. They do not take that type of responsibility. If they are not involved in some kind of conflict, they can also go and seek them out, seek out a persecutor or seek out a hero. So persecutors, again, does not value the opinions of others around them. This includes the hero as well as the victim. They would blame and criticize others too. A hero within the drama triangle doesn't value the ability of others to help themselves, and they would often be an enabler of the person in a victim role. A hero's motives are often the least noticeable part of this drama triangle, and because they do spend quite a lot of time trying to resolve conflict, but actually it can be to uphold this type of a good guy image with the benefits that come from it. It is very important to note that victims, persecutors, and heroes are mere roles and describe how people act within a particular conflict, and this can change from conflict situation to conflict situation. And this is not really a true reflection of who they actually are as people. Gallup Incorporated studied the economic impact of employee engagement across 2.7 million employees from more than 100,000 teams across 50 diverse industries. This study was done in over 140 countries and cultures over the course of 75 years. They estimated that disengaged employees or employees that's involved in conflict have a total of 37% higher absenteeism rates compared to others around them. 25% of employees actually admitted that they are avoiding conflict or workplace drama, and therefore they are taking sick days off. This would then be a burden to their co-workers. They would lose productivity and deadlines, and this will also lead to financial losses. In addition, these disengaged or actively fighting employees show an average of 18% lower productivity rate compared to the others. It is quite concerning to see that employees engaged in this type of conflict would often spend about 2.8 hours of their work week, or 7% actually, on gossip, gathering allies, and then some other non-work related distractions. Presenteeism is also quite concerning, as this is deemed as the loss of productivity while you are actually at work and working. So this can look like stress and anxiety, as well as a loss of focus, and even some physical problems that can contribute to this, like headaches or backaches. Ultimately, the worst thing that can happen is that you have skilled and trained people that leave your organization or workplace when the drama in the workplace become the norm, and this type of conflict is left unmanaged to affect everybody around them. It was found in this study that a third of the employees leave their employer as a result of the conflict in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Jana. So just you've explained to us now why it is important to actually understand conflict in the workplace. So what we did in this method is we used the Gartman triangle, like Jana just explained to us, the 3 different roles. We saw the impact it has had on business, and I think all of us can in some way relate to this. I think we've all been there. But we want to propose that there might be a connection between these 3 roles and the chaos equations from Lorenz, because the conflict becomes chaotic and unpredictable. And is there maybe a link? And how we actually approach that is we use a loop stock transform, which is a method that I developed out of my master's. And some of you here I had some input into that method, and we use it to answer 3 different questions. The first one is, can system dynamics be used to merge static psychological models like the one on the left with a dynamic mathematical theory like the one on the right? Secondly, what valuable levers emerge out of this process, if any? And finally, what does this mean for us in the business environment? So first, let's start with the stock and flow. In the chat, I already put a link for you. You can also scan this image and you can go to our actually simulation. You can play around with it. It's on the IC Exchange. The first one is linking the equations to the actual behaviors. And we saw that the victim is represented by the Y because of its interlinkages with all the other characters. Secondly, the euro is the Z because it really is focused on this interaction between X and Y, which is the victim and the perpetrator. The euro's behavior is fueled when those 2 people are present. And finally, the persecutor, which is the X, which actually refers to this kind of it tries to correct itself based on the victim's behavior. It always attacks the victim. It looks at the victim's behavior. It doesn't really get concerned with the hero. And all these factors look very strange. And that's actually what we want to also show, is that mathematics, you use these factors, but in reality, when we build the simulation, these factors become meaningful. They have meaning. They're not just letters. So we connected the structures up to have the full model run. And the results you can see here, this picture is actually directly from if you scan this, if you follow that link in the chat, you can run the simulation you see. Look at this erratic behavior. It's unpredictable. You cannot know what's going to happen next. The even more interesting part is that a change as small as 10 to the power of minus 12, so 12 zeros and then a 1, is big enough to actually create completely different sets of behavior. So taking this from outside the time domain into to the relationship domain, we see these, okay? You see the hero and the victim has this very strange pattern of connections. So this is about 130,000 data points on each one of these graphs. So these are not lines, they're actually data points, and they create this kind of behavior or the structure you see. Now, the interesting thing is that if you look at the Lorenz attractor that's being drawn here in the 3 dimensions, this hero and victim is, if you look closely, the top view, and the persecuting hero is the front view. And so we know that the results at least is verified in the way that we know this is the Lorenz attractor we've simulated. And secondly, this looks like a butterfly, doesn't it? So this is where the whole idea of the butterfly effect comes from, where a flap of the butterfly's wing on one side of the earth can actually cause a tornado on the other side. And this is kind of comedically explained here, where this butterfly intentionally created a tornado. But it's often not that easy, because it's because of the chaos that something so small can create something so big. And in conflict, especially in drama, we see that happen a lot. Small changes can actually create a big effect. So what we then did was we split up the variables to the persecutor the hero and the victim and try to see the driving forces behind them. If we can reduce them, what effects would that have? So first look at the persecutor, because everybody thinks that we need to take away the persecutor. The persecutor is the real problem in the drama triangle. So we reduce the attack rate of the persecutor, which is how fast and how quickly this person attacks, from 10 to 0.1, which is basically 100 times less. And look at what the relationship does. Again, these two graphs are 130,000 data points, but they look like just lines because of the exact repetition of behavior. But it is a golden kind of circle here, a golden spiral, which means that there's no function. It's not predictable. You cannot know what's going to happen next. So trying to change the persecutor, not really a big win. The hero, so let's look at the hero. The variable that has meaning when we converted it to actually this dynamics model is a kind of a cooldown, where the hero needs to realize they are not helping the system. Their actions are actually being destructive. So the longer they take to realize that, the worse it becomes. So what we do now is we reduce that cooldown to almost nothing, so that the hero immediately realizes and doesn't take part. Look what the relationships does then. Again, 130,000 data points. And look how few data points there is here compared to the edges. And the edges is where the problem really lies. And so it's far more predictable, but it's still not a function. If you look at time domain results, you'll see that they actually get stuck in conflict. But then if you look at the victim, that's where the real interesting thing happens. So what we discovered with the victim is there's a need for a hero, and that's kind of the driving force behind the victim's behavior, is this need for a hero. And if we reduce that need from a 90 to 0.378, look what happens to this relationship. This becomes a function, almost like a triangle. It becomes much more predictable between the hero and the persecutor. Because this relationship becomes a function, simplified, look what happens in the time domain. Something very amazing. All three of the roles are not adopted. They don't form, and the chaos dissipates. If the same exact initial conditions, in this case, it actually dissipates. So what this shows us is this is a major intervention point. It's not the perpetrator, it's not the hero, it's the victim. So in our conclusion, we want to show is that the victim is the center point, and this is validated by not just the simulation, but it's validated from the Kaufman theory in psychology. So that's a really interesting emerging point that came out, which we didn't plan for. Secondly, the leverage, the need for a hero is so essential. So if you see how people kind of want other people to help save them, that's a problem. And what this means to us is that system dynamics may be a bridge between fields like psychology and mathematics that has been in opposition and for quite a long time. And that dynamic insights are far more valuable than static. I mean, we're basically scratching the surface here. There's so much we can still discover about this one simple model, but already we see a lot more insight. And that the core levers coincides with what we see in reality and has meaning to us. Like, it's something practical. I can become aware when people actually are acting in a way that they think they need a hero or someone else to come save them. And taking back your agency, especially for the victim, may actually absolve the whole triangle. Isn't that powerful stuff? So what we want to leave you with is conflict is not going to get better without conscious effort. It's not just something you can put aside and think that it's going to resolve itself. It won't. You need to actually take it head on. By prioritizing your people, understanding what your people need. Jana mentioned so nicely that these roles are not talking about the person. It's actually a character, like a role they take on for that while, but it's not their real personality. And we need to realize that. And giving back the victim their power, they can be that butterfly that actually changes your organization from where it is now to having power and making that change you want to see. So thank you so much. I think that's the end of our talk for now.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that presentation. It just took a minute. Is there anyone that has a specific question? I think we'll allow one question before we continue with the next presentation. Looks like you surprised quite a number of people.
Cool. I see Andrew says, but we lost a minute, so I mean.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, thank you guys.
Can I just chip in? I think I don't have
Yes.
much of a question, but I'm still trying to grapple. It's really great presentation and just a different outlook on things. And I think it can actually also go beyond being implemented from like a workplace perspective and just going to all other social issues and how like the government or like society tackles those kind of issues. Thank you so much for that great work.
Thank you, Mashudu.
Okay, well done. Thank you very much. We will then continue with the next presentation.